All right. Hello and welcome to the Great Wave Podcast. This is episode 2, and our guest today is Hāwane Rios. Hāwane Rios is a singer from Hawaii. Can you introduce yourself?
Velina mai me ke aloha nui a kākua pauloa o wau o Hāwane o mauna awa kia ku'u mauna o ko hako hau ku'u kahawai a ku'u kapuai mea no ku'u āina kulaiwi. Aloha no kākou. My name is Hāwane. My mountain is Mauna Kea. My river is Kohakohau, and the land that raised me is Pu'ukapuaimea on the island of Hawaii. Mahalo nui again for having me here. I am so excited to speak with you and share time and space.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you on here too. Hāwane is she's from Mauna Kea, and she's a singer. So, I first wanted to start by asking you, how did you get into music and singing?
For me, it's always been a part of my life. And so I grew up as a dancer. And so hula, our traditional art form of storytelling, is chant and dance. And hula has been that foundation for me for my entire life. And my mother is a kumu hula. She is a teacher of our dance. And from being like raised at the bottom of her skirt, her pa'u for my whole life, I knew how important it is to our people to continue our ancestral knowledge, tradition of oratory, storytelling. And that is how our language has persisted for so long. That is how our stories have been told for so long. We didn't have a written language. And so everything that we know has been passed down by song and by chant. And so for me, I am so grateful to have been raised in a family of chanters and singers and to have found my purpose very early on in my life. But it wasn't actually until I was in college where I knew that I wanted to write music in my language. I wasn't raised speaking my language, and so I went to college for it at Kakaula o Ke'elikolani College of Hawaiian Language at the University of Hawaii at Hilo. And it was there that I, majored in Hawaiian language with an emphasis in performing arts. And that is where I took some amazing classes in how to write music, Maka'olelo Hawaii. And so because of that, I knew that I needed to be able to understand our language on a visceral level, like a emotional and spiritual level. And so it was after I heard the story of Kukahau'ula and Poli'ahu, who is the goddess of our mountain, Mauna Kea. It's a love story. After I heard that story in our language and could understand it, I, from there, wanted to remember it. And so the first song that I ever wrote in my life was about that story, and it's also like reflective of how their love sounds like to me. And so I taught myself how to play the ukulele and have been writing songs ever since.
How significant was, specifically learning how to sing in your native language, especially when you weren't raised with it?
I was raised singing and chanting, but I wasn't raised speaking. And so I knew my language through song already, but I didn't know exactly what it meant. And so deepening that understanding has been vital in repairing my identity as a Kānaka Maoli. And I think that's like, I can speak for, many Indigenous people when, we say that we are still in the process of that, the process of coming back home to ourselves after so much has been stripped from us. And so singing in my language, speaking my language, chanting in my language, and dancing our stories is ways that I affirm myself as an Indigenous woman of this place, and my offering to the next 7 generations is something that I know that I can leave behind. And that's why I record music. And so now it's about like creating more so that people who come next will know that we are still here and still proud of where we come from.
Do you think that in connecting with your heritage and connecting with your land and your music and connecting with your language, do you think that that will influence how your family and your next generations will also view their culture?
Absolutely. Hanauna, which is generations in our language, it's sacred, because we're giving life, and so I always say this, every time I speak about language and anytime I speak about music, is that somebody, never stopped singing, never stopped chanting, and never stopped dancing with the literal ban of our language in the 1800s and early 1900s, the ban of our dance. It was literally illegal for us to speak our language and illegal for us to dance our hula and to practice our own religion and connection to the elements and to the gods and the goddesses. And so for me, after all of that loss and all of the ache and the heartache and the agony that comes with having your land and who you are stripped from you, every single time I speak my language, every single time I sing, I'm not just doing it for myself. I'm also doing it for the ones that came before that never got the chance to be who they are in their own home. And so this next generation coming up, as a resource educator and now as a parent, it's one of the most important things we do is that we continue to live it so that they live it, and they live it earlier than we got to in our lifetime. Like my mom is a part of the generation that is the Renaissance generation that brought so much of this back, so much of our language and our mo'aukala, our culture, back into the forefront of who we are as Hawaii. She was a part of that generation that is, a beneficiary of the generation before her. And so, yeah, very much so. It's a lived kuleana, a lived responsibility, and an honorable one too. And so all of our children speak our language. And I literally just woke up today and started a hula practice with our youngest daughter. And so it makes me smile to know that, we're passing it down now. We're in the time of our lives where we can pass it down.
Do you see it as a form of healing when you share your culture?
Absolutely. Yeah, for me, this is like the time of our, of our existence as Kānaka Maoli of Hawaii, where we are reaffirming ourselves every day by practicing it, like how I said before, by living it. And so when it comes to healing, a lot of the work that I do outside of music is teaching a papaoli, which is a chant class, and it's all just for women right now, because we have so much that we need to heal as wahine and future matriarchs. And so it's a safe space for women. And in that space, we are learning together how to look at our own ways of healing, our own tools of healing, and looking at chant as our first medicine, our voice as our first medicine. Because our voice and the vibrations of our voice and the frequency of our voice, it can go into our body and create a frequency of release, that is of our own making, and of our own mauli, our own power and mana. And so that has been my kuleana, my responsibility, in the past few years as I get a little bit older, is now learning how to do that for myself and not look so outside of myself and outside to other people's belief systems and cultures, but look into ours first, and be able to set a good foundation of healing and tools so that we can gift that to our children, so that they don't have to search so much for who they are and how to claim who they are and ground themselves in who they are. And so, yeah, I think that is one of the most beautiful and restorative ways of returning.
How can you prevent the effects of American culture and American control to not affect and poison your culture, especially in your youth?
I feel like we're living in a time where the conversation has created more connection and more space to learn how to still exist and how to still be firm in who we are under a illegally occupying regime. And it's hard, because we are oppressed in our own homelands. We are a minority in our own homeland. And so we have learned through, these past generations that have been under this occupation how to cope, and a lot of the time it's not healthy for us because we don't have access to our own land. This is the most expensive state to live in. And so when you have so many things that are just coming down on you, when you don't have basic care, and just the basic human needs taken care of, it's very, very hard to continue to live fully in a space of strength and autonomy when it's continuously and actively being stripped away from us. And so for me, it's about knowing where my mana lives and knowing where the mana of the earth lives and where that comes from, and continuing to nurture that connection, because that is what is real. All of this that is happening to all of us, this is temporary, right? But even in this temporary moment, it is grueling and traumatizing. And so what do we do? How do we affirm ourselves? And so what I do is I stand up and I speak up and I show up. And we've been doing that as a family for Mauna Kea for the past 12 years. And so, Aloha Āina looks different for everybody, and it's diverse and incredible. And it's amazing when we all come together with all of these different facets of who we are and different passions and talents and things to offer and give. When we come together to do that, powerful things happen. And so Aloha Āina is really at its root to love the land like we love our family, because the land is our family. And so using our voice, using our platforms, and doing whatever we can to continue to spread this message about what is happening here in the islands in the middle of the Pacific Ocean is a part of affirming ourselves, is a part of reclaiming. I chant every day. I sing every day. Even if it's small, that is how I reclaim myself every day. And I know that this governing system, it's not going to last forever, because it can't. Life is not sustainable under this regime. And so every single day we do something, even if it might be as small as planting a kalo or strumming your ukulele or chanting the sana. Even if it's that micro, it has a macro possibility and a macro response from the universe that calls in a change and a shift. And we might not see this full-on change in our lifetime, but we have to believe and have hope for that, so that our next generation is strong enough in their foundation to stand for what is right and to stand for and speak up for the rights of the land.
Your family, your mother, yourself, your sister, are very involved in activism and protecting your land, especially when most people don't listen or choose not to understand the struggle of your people, how you're the true indigenous people of your land, and how Hawaii is not part of America. How are you able to persevere through that and still fight for your land?
That's an amazing question, and it's one that I just have to kind of sit with. I think that I really do care, like so deeply about where we come from, and like have spent my life learning the mo'oku'auhau, the genealogy of how we are connected to this very place, and how our creation stories root us so deeply into everything that is Hawaii. And so knowing that, knowing that truth, and knowing that that is what is real for me, feeding that connection, and like feeding that relationship that I have to the land is a part of me resisting, and it is a part of me saying, no, I do not believe in this governing system that was not set up for us to ever thrive or be successful in. And so we learn how to be very close to who we are and what makes us who we are, so that when we do step into these spaces that were not meant for us, like the courtroom, and these court spaces that we've been in for the past 12 years, when we do step in, we step in with all we are, bringing in our 40, 400, 4,000, and 400,000 ancestors with us into everything that we do. And so I believe that we don't do anything alone. We have so much protection and love from our ancestors, and that is why we are all still here. Somebody lived and loved enough for us to still exist here and still be here. And so now, like I said, Aloha Āina looks differently for everybody. It's not the same, and it doesn't have to be the same process and even the same passion for everyone. But for me and my family, I learned Aloha Āina from watching my parents stand up as leaders in these movements. I learned from what they do, and how they respect and care for their relationships to our community and to our land bases that we're standing to protect. And from that, learning, and from their teaching, we also reclaim so much of our own belief in ourselves. We've been pushed aside and heavily traumatized by all of these stereotypes of Hawaiians, and all of the oppression that has been put onto us. And so the more we gather in family, the more we gather on the front lines, the more we take our power back. And I'm grateful to see that, and to be doing whatever I can to feed that momentum in a good way in my lifetime.
Recently, like a couple of days ago, was July 4th, which a lot of people celebrated. What is seeing a lot of people celebrate July 4th and celebrate this holiday that really celebrates independence only for the colonizers? What does that represent to you?
I see that as a societal conditioning, like I remember when I was growing up, and, everybody's houses were, decorated with the American flag and all of the red, white, and blue. And like I had so many family members, hold barbecues and like celebrate the day off in the same way. And that is because that is what, has been modeled for us. That's what we've been conditioned to do. And now, but there's always been somebody resisting that. There's always been somebody saying, this is not my Independence Day. La Ku'oko'a in November is our Independence Day. And so like, because of that, because there's always a family member that will say that, at least in my family, and hearing that echo throughout my lifetime, it was really important in like activating me now, as an adult. And so I see that as really what we've been told to believe, and what we've been taught to celebrate. And now, though, we have social media and we have bigger conversations about what all of this means. Now we're questioning it, and not just individually or in our small groups, but like as a society, as a people from all over the world. And because of that, there is more shift in the way that people celebrate or don't celebrate that day. there was more posts that like I ever saw, like in the last few years about our own Hawaiian sovereignty on that day, instead of seeing so many, with the fireworks and with all of the decorations going on. But I saw more people questioning it. And that is really hopeful. We have a lot of younger generation activists in Aloha Āina and just activated people coming up and saying, no, I will not, just like yourself, and that's already changing so much.
Does Hawaii have a day that it celebrates its sovereignty specifically?
We do, and that is November 28th on La Ku'oko'a. And every year we or a group of people, I haven't been there every year, but a group of people will go up, a group of kia'i, protectors of Mauna Kea and protectors of Hawaii, will go to the highest point of Mauna Kea. And that is where they fly the biggest flag that we have of our Hawaiian flag at the very top, which is the highest point in the world from the seafloor. And so on that day, there's so many different community events and so many, just so many gatherings and celebrations commemorating our Independence Day.
What role do you think your mother, who is a very notable Hawaiian activist, what role do you think she had on your shaping and how you were able to connect with both fighting for your culture and your heritage?
Oh, she had the biggest role and still does, the greatest impact on me as a person and as a wahine. I grew up watching her testify, on behalf of our hunters in Waimea that were fighting against this fence that was coming up in our forest that would block the pigs from doing what they are meant to do up in the forest, which is to till and bring up the land and the moss so that the water can come down the mountain and into our reservoirs and our rivers. I watched her as she stood up for them, and I was very young. And then the same for every single movement that we've had on Hawaii Island. She has lent her voice and her hula and her chanting and her knowledge to supporting it. And I have a deep reverence for her, especially as I get older and older and now are raising children with my partner. Now I see what she did for me and what she does for, both me and my sister. She shows us by living it. Makahana ka ike, she really has this knowledge because she has done it. She has done the hard work and she's never stopped. And so she inspires me profoundly. And she's my best friend and my mentor and my kumu, and someone that I am so honored to have been born to.
There's a lot of different movements that you've been a part of in protecting Hawaii and its heritage and your land. I think that the most current one, or at least the largest one that I've seen recently, is the movement to protect Mauna Kea. Can you tell me a little bit about that movement?
Of course. So the movement to protect Mauna Kea has been a very long, long movement, and long before me and my family were a part of it as petitioners. And so if you know our mountain, Mauna Kea, and you know its vastness and its sheer size and sacredness, then you also have seen the telescopes that are on them right now, or on the summit right now. And so about 12 years ago, the TMT, which is a 30-meter telescope project, was proposed to be built on the northern plateau of Mauna Kea. So it's not directly on the summit, but to the north. And,
Mm-hmm.
In this, time period when we were, at least 12, 13 years ago, there was a very small group that decided to be petitioners against this proposal, and my family joined in after my sister saw a spirit being at Manaua, which is the rain rock in Waimea, where we come from. And the spirit being she saw was Mo'oina Naya, who lives in Waiau, which is the lake on the top of the mountain. And she saw this spirit form and this goddess form when she was 9 years old. And that is when she asked my mom, the spirit has called us to try one more time to protect the mountain. And so that is why our family got involved into the contested case hearings in the beginning. And so we've had a frontline stand in 2014, 2015, and recently in 2019. All along this journey, going through the Board of Land and Natural Resources cases, going through the contested case hearings, all the way up to the Supreme Court. And we went to the Supreme Court twice, and both times it did not come out, in our favor. And so because of that, if you look up Mauna Kea and you look up Protect Mauna Kea, you will see the thousands and thousands of people who came from the far reaches and the far corners of the earth to stand on our front lines in 2019, where 38 of our kupuna, our elders, were arrested, and where, again, thousands had gathered for 9 months to stop the telescope equipment from going up the mountain. And so the journey has been a long one, and it's not easy, standing up for a place that you love and constantly being told no, that you don't matter and your voice doesn't matter. It takes a toll. And so our people have stood with so much courage and so much resilience. And our no in the beginning should have been enough. We come from this land, we are descendants of this land. And so when the indigenous people come to say no, I just so wish that we all were heard and that it mattered to all of these powers that be. And so rising together and creating this mighty wave, as my mom calls it, has created so many strong and powerful connections of solidarity with many movements around the world. And so I never would want to change my life and what we do, and what we've been doing for the past 12 years, because it has taught us so much. It has connected our communities and our nation, our lahui, in so many deep and healing ways. And it really is the Mauna that did that. Mauna Kea that is doing that.
What do you think it'll take for people to take the struggle of the Hawaiian people seriously?
I think that it takes so many different avenues of activism and of change in so many different fields, from the legislature all the way down to grassroots organizing. There is so much that is already happening to turn, people's attention to us. And this is like long time in the making. Like I said before, so many people throughout the generations have stood as kia'i and have been calling out to be heard for so long. We would not be here at this space we are in as this lahui without all of the many kia'i that have come before us. And because of all of that work, we can stand here more affirmed in who we are. And like I said, the use of social media, the use of these big platforms are activating people that have never heard about Mauna Kea and never heard about Red Hill that is happening on Oahu with the Navy poisoning the aquifer at Kapukaki. All of these like really huge movements in Hawaii are being amplified and supported by so many different movements and so many different indigenous people and non-indigenous people alike, and that, I believe, is helping to shift so much. We're not going to change this government. This government is set up to destroy and silence us. But what we can do is continue to connect with the good people that are within these government systems that do want to listen and do want to help. We can continue to unite and heal more together so that our voices are strong, and so that our community connections are strong, because it really starts here. It starts small. It starts in our families. It starts in our conversations like this. And even in this space, we're still changing something because we're speaking about it. And more people, because of this platform and how you're choosing to use it, will say, oh, I want to learn a little bit more about what's happening there. And when people do that and then share what's happening in their homelands, then we can support one another.
There's the movement for people to recognize that Hawaii is its own separate sovereign entity and it's not part of America. And I think that that's one movement that I have only learned about recently, I think a couple months ago. And it's one that I think is very less known about. Can you tell me a bit more about how you're trying to share that?
There are people that that are the leaders of the sovereignty movement that can share and speak more in more detail about what sovereignty and independence and the strive for that recognition really entails, because it is a long and completely inspiring and powerful movement that I have been activated by over and over again in my life. And I stand as somebody who is calling for independence and sovereignty of our nation. What that looks like is returning the autonomy to the people. And so many people will, say things like, you're lucky that it was America that took you over, or somebody else would have if America didn't, without recognizing that we had our own monarchy. We had our own kings and queens and people in leadership that knew how to govern these lands. And Kalakaua, King Kalakaua, who was our last king, he traveled around the world to get solidarity and really foster friendship between us and the larger countries that would recognize our sovereignty. And so, because we're so small and we're in the middle of the ocean, there's just this stereotype that, we shouldn't be the ones to govern our own lands, and that we're too small of a country, and that it would never happen, and it would never be beneficial to the people if Hawaiians had their autonomy back. But I just return back to what I have learned, and what I have experienced from revering our ali'i, our chiefs, our kings and queens for so long, is that we have done this for thousands of years. Our people still have the knowledge of how to care for this place and the balance and the life of this land. And we should be the ones making the decisions. We should be the ones at the head of the table and not continuously silenced. And so this movement for sovereignty is one that is going to continue, and it's one that is going to activate generations upon generations of Hawaiians until we can achieve our sovereignty again.
Why do you think it is that most people from the US see Indigenous culture and the idea of Indigenous and Hawaiian sovereignty as so impossible?
Because that's what they're taught too. Like the way that we're all taught history in school is that there was these necessary evils that were meant to happen so that we could have this great nation. I was raised in a history class with history books that told that same story, and that did not respect or revere the first peoples of any of the land that is in the occupied US. And, they wrote about us the same way that they write about our Native American brothers and sisters, that we are savages, and that our lives didn't matter. There is a Cree that you know that was taught to all of these people, all of these colonizers that came to our shores to just annihilate us, and so that internalized story is within so many people when you don't know any different, or you choose to not know any different. And it's like something that you choose to believe, which makes it okay for all of these, horrible and atrocious things to have happened. And they also like to, they like to contextualize it as if it didn't happen recently, that as if all of these things happened so long ago. It was only 200 years ago that, you know, this colonization happened onto Hawaii. It's not that long ago, And so I think it's the way that it's painted for people. That is how people see it until they learn otherwise. And then we have a choice to be activated by it or to continue to live and benefit from the privilege of ignoring it, And so we are living in such an important time now because all of these old ideas and these old harmful ways of being and thinking are being called out and brought to light, and people have to face themselves. We all have to face ourselves and what we have been taught to believe that is harmful to one another. And so because of that, this next generation is on a whole different level than I was when I was your age, because the conversations are consistent, and we're no longer tolerating a lot of these old tired ideas that paint a picture of the things that aren't the truth. So we have access to the internet, we have access to one another. It's about educating ourselves, talking to one another, and then looking at all of us, all of ourselves, and saying, okay, what kind of internalized prejudice do I have, or internalized idea do I have about another Native people or another Native place, Indigenous place? And how can I shift and change those things so that I'm not a part of this massive problem? And so it really does start in ourselves first, and critically looking at what we've been taught to believe and unlearning that.
Like you said, the colonization of Hawaii was only 200 years ago. How have you seen how that trauma that your ancestors experienced, how have you been able to see that trickle down generationally? And how are you and the movement to bring back Hawaiian culture able to heal that trauma?
I see it in the depression that I sometimes suffer and the anxiety that I go through, the heartache of losing your land, and language and everything that we've spoken about, in this time together. Losing that and knowing, that you have ancestors that lived through it, that witnessed it, and that did their best to survive it, is its own kind of pain. It's like a eha kumakena, and I only have language in my language to express that kind of pain. It's a grief
Mhm.
that's so deep. And so I spend time with that grief, and spend time learning about the kupuna, the ancestors that I have in my own lineage, saying their names out loud. And every time I say their name, I hope we heal a little bit more, in our family line. And to remember what all of our people did throughout all of this change and all of this turmoil and what they did out of love for us. We're still a people that are still here. We're still living. It's not something that died a long time ago. And that's something that I see so much when people refer to Hawaiians. They'll say, Hawaiians did this. Hawaiians believe. They speak about us as we're something that is forgotten and past tense, but we're still here. And so praying to them and remembering them is a part of how I heal. Looking at all of these different, impacts of what colonization and living under oppression has done onto my body physically, is a part of loving myself and into my own autonomy and recognizing and believing in our own tools and our own medicine is how I continue to deepen that healing. But it's hard, like it is really hard to continue to heal when you're continuously also being trampled on in your own homeland and priced out of your own homelands. And so we got to do it every single day. And if we don't do it every day, and there's some days that I don't, recognize what I need to do to heal, and I get really busy and I get really into um, all of the different responsibilities that I have. If I don't look at those things that are coming up to be revealed, then sometimes I get a really big lesson. And I gotta, rest and get and put into a situation where I need to really listen to myself and listen to my body, because we're constantly going through something here, because my mom says this often. She says we have a problem, an issue for every single minute, every single second of the day. Somebody is trying to build on our shorelines or build on our mountaintops or bomb our seabeds. There's so many things that we have going on in Hawaii that could just keep us in a depression. And so that's why we got to lean on each other, lean on our relationships with one another. I could not do what I do without the people in my life, and could not go back onto those front lines without community care and support. And so that's how I do what I do to stay as healthy as I possibly can. And so spending time with my elders, spending time with our children, my beloved, all of those things are medicine, and help to strengthen the backbone so that when we do have to go onto the front line, we're going as whole as we can. And that's how I see, the people that I look up to. I see them now really taking care of themselves and paying attention to their health and mental health more and more. When I was younger, this wasn't really a conversation. Our mental, our emotional health, now it is. And so I'm shifting the way that I do my work now, and looking at how I can care for myself as an act of resistance too, and that's how I've been navigating that recent shift.
What role does faith and religion have in both your life and in Hawaii's culture?
I can speak for myself when speaking about belief systems and religion and my family. We we are people of the earth and people of ceremony, and so I am grateful to come from a community that still lives that and still practices that, and I see it so much and revitalizing, so much in so many of our communities across the islands. I think that, yeah, the first thing that colonizers do when they come into any new land is they strip the language, cause a lot of violence and harm, and introduce diseases, and then take the power away, by taking the land away, and then introduce a whole different belief system. In Hawaii, when they introduced Christianity and Catholicism, they told our people that it would save their lives. And this is after millions and millions of our people died due to introduced disease that was introduced strategically to our people and our shores. And so, of course, because our people are a people of love and a family, they wanted to do anything that they could. And so they said, okay, I'm going to believe this new religion. And so for generations, these religions have been prevalent in Hawaii, and even prevalent in our schools. When I was in high school, I went to a Protestant school, which is ironically a school for all Hawaiians, Kamehameha. And I had to go to church to the chapel every Sunday if I stayed in the dorms. And we always were doing a Christian prayer. But that's not how I was raised. My mom raised me in ceremony. She raised me in pule, in chant, and in hula, which is our belief system as a people. And it's diverse. It's not all the same for every single Kānaka. Our language isn't the same for every single island. It's diverse. And so I speak on behalf of my family and our belief systems and our affirming of who we are as Kānaka. And because of that, because I had that foundation, I was very confused when I was in high school, and I had even explored different religious belief systems because I just wanted to know, and I just wanted to learn, and I wasn't with my family. I boarded through those years of my life. And so I was on a completely different island, and so I didn't have the foundation of my everyday family to secure me on to the earth and say, okay, this is what we know of who we are, and so I was kind of going through an identity crisis so early on in my life, and so now I have reconciled all of that confusion by affirming again myself and who I am and our practices, and not every single person is going to not every single Kānaka is going to believe in the same things that I believe in, and that's okay. You know, we all have our own journey and our own belief systems, and I fiercely know who I am, and because of that, I am just setting a good a good foundation for my own ohana and our own practices and our own community practices.
How do you see Hawaiian religion and culture being misrepresented and appropriated?
Oh yeah. Um, oh yeah, we are heavily appropriated and commercialized, exoticized, sexualized in every which way, and
Mhm.
people make fun of like our sacred ritual things, and like totems, like our ki'i, which is like what you see at many tiki bars, and even commercialize our hula, our sacred dance, and reduce us to grass skirts and coconut bras and fake flowers, and so we are heavily commodified around the world, which gives us this stereotype that we're a paradise meant for anyone and anyone to just come and visit without invitation, to just come and build luxury homes. We are spoken about, like I've said before, as something of the past. And so people still ask me if we live in grass huts, because they don't know anything about who we are and what we've been through. We are reduced to being lazy and and just worthless, you know? And that is because that
Mhm.
stereotype has been forced upon people over and over and over again. The way that we're depicted in movies, you know, that just dumb, angry Hawaiians. We don't have
Yeah.
a vast representation even in the media or the movies or the shows. It's very few and far in between. And so, yeah, this story of who we are and our lands, just this kind of free for all story. Oh, and also that we're just meant to serve. We're either performing or working in the
Mm.
hotels. That's what people think of us, that, as if that's
Yeah.
all we were meant to do, and all we
Yeah.
were told we could do, and so it just reduces us and reduces us. And that is no disrespect to anybody working in the service industry, because I have worked years and years dancing in the shows and worked in the hotel industry, because that was what was set up for us to have job opportunities in. And so um, that is just also, though, what people think of us, is that we're just meant to be of service, meant to just perform. And so it's a surprise when we say absolutely not. We're not just meant to do those things for you, and when we start to, you know, command respect and care of our land, of the wildlife here, of the people. People are bent out of shape. They don't even know how to handle it, because they think that we don't know how to articulate ourselves. They think that we don't have the knowledge and the courage to continue to gain our autonomy by using our voices. But now, we are the lawyers, we are the doctors, we are the teachers, we are the singers. There's so many Kanaka in every single facet that creates this power among us, because we have strived, to continue to have excellence in everything that we do. And so, uh, yeah, people will tend to write us off, and we are no longer allowing for that.
There's a lot of different aspects of culture, and I think the first one I want to talk about is something that you mentioned, which was representation. How have you seen Pacific Islander, but specifically Hawaiian representation change in the past few years, and what do you think needs to happen to progress it further?
I think that there's been a lot of movement, that there's more Kanaka working in the industry, and there's more Kanaka that are directing and like creating our own movies, our own shows, our own storytelling. And so I am seeing a lot of like incredible progress, but in like the huge, celebrity mainstream, um, what is it even called? Like this mainstream vibe of it all,
Media,
like,
Hollywood.
yeah, it's very few. We don't have many Hawaiians, we don't have a lot of Kānaka Maoli, meaning we don't have like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of actors, like
Mhm.
there's still and a great and amazingly talented group of people that represent Hawaii within that whole industry. But I do want to see more. I want to see us have more opportunities. I want to see us have whole TV shows that get on Netflix, that are of our epics and of like, yeah, our legends. Like I like yearn to see that, on like in Marvel and like those kinds of like big funded movies that represent and are written by our own people, that have like the huge backing and the huge funding to create in those spaces. I do yearn to see that. And I know that there's so many people that are Kanaka Maoli that are working really hard to do that, and have created so many films in the recent years that have been starting to make this like headway, and this really great pathway of more Kanaka in the industry.
And do you think that that has to start with, independent filmmakers and actors in Hawaii? Or do you think that has to start with systematic change in Hollywood?
I mean, both, for sure. I think Hollywood is so toxic and elitist, and so of course there has to be huge changes within that industry to even be a safe space for more indigenous people and people of color. And I do believe so deeply in our independent filmmakers and independent artists, because like myself, that is what I do as well, and so there's so much that happens when we have the freedom to create, and so like some of the things that I'm most inspired by are the independent films, and are the films that don't have the massive budgets yet, because like they're telling real stories, real stories that people can really connect to and really see themselves in. And I would love, to see that more represented on these really big screens. Um, and I really look to Aotearoa, New Zealand, for their progression in film, and like their own TV channel they have, that is in Te Reo Maori. It's, I believe, called Maori TV. Like they're pioneering this really amazing effort to create more channels of representation. And so I want to see that not just for Hawaii, but for all of Oceania, all of the Moana Nui people, because we are all one people. We share this ocean, this ocean connects us. And so, yeah, I want to see us more, and I want to see us respected and in roles that are important, and that challenge these stereotypes about all of us, and see us as who we are, so that our next generations can continue to see themselves reflected back at them, not just in the movies, but on TikTok and Instagram and all of these other ways of learning, and means of learning. And so I really hope that for all of us.
The next thing I want to talk about regarding culture is dance culture in Hawaii. So you mentioned that when you grew up, you were also a dancer. Can you talk
Mhm.
about the significance of dance in your culture?
Hula is our communication with everything, and is our our storytelling, our vessel of storytelling and remembering. And it's like this visceral embodiment of of our language and of our land. And so growing up as a dancer, and growing up loving hula, like I yearned for hula. And so for me, I know that it was an ancestral calling to dance, and to watch my mom and my aunties dance in front of me, and to mimic them, and to memorize all of the chants that they were memorizing from when I was very young. I was drawn to that. And so hula, in especially in our family and for our lineage, is synonymous with who we are. And so I am grateful to have been born to a kumu hula who was taught early on in her life, by a few different kumu hula, until she found the kumu that she unikied from, who she graduated from in Kona. And she was in her 20s when she finally did her uniki. And because of that, she had me just a few years after that. Because of that, I was raised at every single one of her practices, and
Oh,
raised
wow.
at every single one of the gatherings, community gatherings that she was uh, holding the protocol for. And so it's also what holds and keeps me grounded too. to this land is hula. And I wouldn't be who I am without being raised, being raised watching and being raised chanting. And I see it in my sister too. I see it in my cousins. And so to be from a family that has a lineage of hula that is like specific to our own ohana style is such a sacred thing to me, and something that I'm very, very grateful for.
How are you able to push through, again, misrepresentation of your culture and fetishization of your dance, and show what it truly is, what it means to your family, what it means to your culture?
I think that we just continue to do it and to live it. And so back in 2019, we had the world watching us on the front lines of Mauna Kea, and we held a ceremony every single day, 3 times a day. Sunrise, noon, and right before sunset. And people came from all over the world, like I was telling you. And so everyone had a chance to learn. It didn't matter what bloodline you came from. It didn't matter what color skin. Everybody was welcome to try and to learn. And even our own people who were not raised dancing hula and always wanted to try but never quite got into it. They came and we danced every single day, 3 times a day. And that is one way that we held the ceremony of our front lines and the ceremony of our sacred relationship with the Mauna was through our dance, was through our oli. And so I think that when we live that like we did there, it changes people's perceptions of who we are. It challenges them about what they used to think about us, because it's showing us on our own land, protecting our land through our dance. And that activates a different way of seeing people. I saw people really change after witnessing that. And so it's not up to us to walk everyone through nature and, educate every last person about who we are and where we come from. A lot of that self-reflection work has to happen within us individually, and so because the emotional burden of and just the emotional tax of continuously having to educate people over and over again, or correct people over and over again, shouldn't always have to, fall on us. I think it's a really huge opportunity for people, if they are going to come to Hawaii, to learn a little bit of more about who we are and how to respect our homeland, how to respect our dance and our performances, even at the luau, And so, yeah, there's ways that we now have to hold ourselves accountable to, again, what we were taught to believe. And so to whoever, is joining us and listening to this, I hope that this is an invitation for all of us to do that. Before we go and step onto somebody else's land, before anyone comes here, learn about us, and how to walk in a good way here. And yeah, how to be respectful when visiting some place that you're not from.
The final thing I want to talk about kind of touches on that, is the tourist industry in Hawaii. For many, many years, I think this is probably the most prominent thing I've seen, and I've seen for the longest time, have been Indigenous Hawaiian people trying to tell people not to come to Hawaii and to not support the tourist industry in Hawaii. How have you been able to see how the tourist industry in Hawaii has affected your homeland?
I grew up watching big, high, tall hotels going up on the shores that I was raised on. the first memory of displacement I have is when my ancestral beach called Anaiho'omalu was sold off to millionaire, rich white people. And I was there when they handed over those keys and banned us from ever camping down there again. And so I come from the generation where my mom was, we were just talking about this actually. She was raised seeing her coastlines and has lived a whole life of watching gentrification and $1 million homes come up all around us. And so I got to see some of that, the cusp of when there was nothing to the change in my own lifetime. And it has a deep effect, on me and just the feelings of displacement and the heartache of not being able to even have access to our own lands. And so I wrote an article for kayak.com actually about tourism in Hawaii. And we were asking during the pandemic for people to not come to Hawaii. We are the descendants of those who survived epidemics, massive epidemics that took out millions and millions of our people in just a few years. We are, a small island nation. And so we were asking people not to come during that time to protect our home and our families and our own governing system, our own government, our own governor opened up Hawaii while we watched Aotearoa shut down and had, zero cases of COVID in many of their counties because of it. And so, again, it's a huge systemic change that is needed, but it also is an individual awareness about really listening to the people and coming here when you have an invitation. And when the people say, do not come, don't. Just listen, And that is what I yearn for people to really hear, is that, there's a wisdom when we're calling for nobody to come to our shores. There's a wisdom in that. And we see it reflected in all of the spaces that really shut down during that heavy pandemic time. And so what I would want to see is a tourist season, have a tourist season for when people can come here and enjoy our Hawaii, and then a season for our own people to be able to go to our own shorelines without having thousands and thousands of visitors upon the places that we go to fish and the places that we go to hunt, to restore even just a little bit more balance.
As a final thought, what do you hope people take from this conversation? What do you hope people can learn about your culture, how to respect it, understanding what your people have gone through?
I really just hope that, every person who has decided to sit and listen and engage in everything that has been shared in this space is that you feel invited to delve more, into your own learning of who you are and where you come from. Where is your mountain? What is the name of your river? What are the lands that raised you? What is the name of your ancestors? I hope that this conversation inspires you to really learn about where your water comes from and where you find your feet. And it is from that space of really knowing, and affirming yourself and who you are, that you can really see, other people and where they're from, and have a really deep sense of reverence and respect for the way that we exchange, for the way that we all interact, and the way that we visit each other's homelands, and the way that we hold solidarity for each other's movements and create more relationships through a sphere of openness and more understanding. I really hope that you you are called to protecting Mauna Kea with us, and that you are called to support our people and all of our allies in protecting our mountain from the potential harm of more desecration on our summits. I hope that you feel moved by our stance, and that you also reach out when your people and when your lands are in need of help, so we may stand in solidarity with you. I have one thing that I would do want to ask everybody listening. We are trying to get 500,000 signatures on our online petition. You can sign that petition by clicking a link in my bio on Instagram at Hāwane Music, and you can also follow at Protect Mauna Kea, and then just spread the word about getting 500,000 signatures to help in the effort of protecting our mountain. And I hope that you feel inspired to go check out my music, and just listen to some of the songs that I've written while standing on the front lines, and the songs that I've written about loving land. I just came out with a single called The Sun Path, which is about Holaniku, which is the last atoll in our Hawaiian archipelago, the eldest atoll. And I spent 7 months there 12 years ago, and 3 months there this past year, along with my sister Kapule. And so that song is out now, and it is to bring more awareness to Papahana Mokuākea, our northwestern Hawaiian islands, and the care of the wildlife and the animals there. And from my mountain to your mountain, aloha nui. From my river to your river, aloha nui. And from my ancestors to your ancestors, aloha no kakua pauloa. It's been such a pleasure to talk with you, and I'm so proud of you, as a young, activated person coming out to create this space for more conversation. This is really awesome and really beautiful, and I am grateful to have been a part of it.
Yes, thank you so much, Hāwane. Thank you for coming on this podcast and talking about some very, very important things. If you're listening to this, please go to Hāwane's Instagram bio and sign the petition, and listen to Hāwane's music, because it is just so beautiful. I want to again thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for listening.
Mahalo nui.